Another episode of Ask the Expert. And of course, we have I always think of like with DJs where they'll have like residency. So we have a resident, host on the second Thursday of every month. Alex Mahgoub is here, and he is going to be interviewing Jenn Trepeck about health, which definitely is a very not only topical topic at this moment in time, but something that we all can have. So Alex, I will hand it off to you and be your sidekick, Ed McMahon of the show, if you will. So for those of you who remember Johnny Carson,
Martin, you're the best Ed.
yes,
there you go. Ooh. So really excited to be interviewing Jenn Trepeck here to talk about health and wellness in the age of Corona. Jenn is an optimal health coach. She's been coaching clients for over a decade. She also has this amazing podcast. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, check it out. It's called Salad with a Side of Fries. And Jenn, thank you so much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. This is going to be so fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really helpful. For those who are watching, listening, if you have questions, you can comment below. We'll get to them towards the end of our interview. But I have a lot of questions here, and I just want to get started. But a little bit more about you, Jenn. Why did you get into this type of work?
Yeah, so it's funny. I grew up the skinny one in a family of dieters, which was awesome until that went away. And then it was the opposite of awesome. But when that happened, I was like, oh, wait, I know what to do. I watched this. And so I did what I saw. I tried every diet under the sun. I did that whole gain and lose situation for years until I actually found the program that I now teach. And for me, it was essentially the nutrition education we're all supposed to know, and no one ever taught us.
Wow.
And so I was like, everybody needs to know this. How is this not what we learned, in school, health class, and all the things? And if our parents don't know it, how can we expect to have learned it? And so from then on, it's, this program is the only thing that's allowed me to say I've kicked my food issues. And so from then on, I was like on a mission to pay it forward and help people help themselves with this information.
Beautiful.
So thank you.
Information. So what does it mean to be healthy? I like drinking coffee. I like candy and ice cream. Can someone like me be healthy?
Especially at the meetings, he shows up loaded with a whole bowl of snacks.
One of the
every meeting.
Pre-COVID,
that is.
Right. when we used to meet and congregate, we would bring snacks. It's right. It's funny. I think people have this misconception about health that to be quote unquote healthy, it's this crazy extreme situation. And it's not at all. Health is really balance, because if we're living in that extreme in black and white, that's not healthful mentally. So if we can redefine health to be living in that gray area between black and white and enjoying the things that we love, and, maybe in different points, in our path, we're maybe more restrictive than others, depending on where we are in relation to our goals, we might be making different decisions. But listen, my podcast is called Salad with a Side of Fries. I mean, we're all about balance,
I'm so curious about that balance, because, we are bombarded with information from the internet and TV on our phones. Eat this, don't eat that. Carbs are good one week, the next week they're terrible. Fat's good one week, then it's terrible. Sugar's bad all the time, but I love it.
Right.
So what's the right recipe? How can we do this balancing act that you talk about?
Yeah. So overall, we've all heard of the 80-20 rule in business, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very familiar.
Live life by the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time we're making healthful, nutritious choices. 20% are the indulgences and the things that, are the treats. And, to clear up all of the misinformation and bad science and marketing, I think a lot of it has to come down to common sense. Right? Like, nobody died from eating too much broccoli. No matter what they say about broccoli, like, no one's died from eating too much. So just chill. you know? And then we can all, you know, and again, with the common sense, think back to people have lived for a lot longer than we've known about things like all these different diets out there. Right. So if we can go back to fundamentally, what do humans need? What all of us, as much as we're different, there are some things universal about how the body works. And so if that's the basis of this education that I talk about, so that if we can establish that, then we have a framework from which to evaluate all of the things that are coming at us from social media and our friends and the news and all that craziness.
Yeah, I mean, that's helpful, that way of kind of talking about it, that 80-20 rule. I think I'm doing the opposite. I'm doing 80%, you know, caffeine and sweets and candy and fats and all of that. But if I switch it around and try to find more balance, to your point, I'll feel better. I'll probably look better, and, you know, it'll just be better for everybody.
And
yeah, go ahead.
I also think right now we're all just doing what we got to do to get through the day. And to have a little self-compassion, especially in these times. And maybe this is not the moment where you're choosing to press really hard toward a health-related goal. That's okay too. I think everybody, no matter what your choices are, is valid and appropriate, and own that. Because I think this whole shaming around using this time in some certain way or responding some certain way isn't helpful for anybody.
Yeah, and I agree completely. We have to be easy with ourselves. We can't be tough on ourselves and be like, I can't believe you ate that ice cream. It could be like, okay, you ate that ice cream, cool. Maybe tomorrow don't eat the whole pint, all right? Eat a third of it and save it for the next day. You know, you'll save money and calories. You know, but as we're talking about being at home all day long and eating, what do you recommend? Because I hear like 3 meals a day is the right way. I hear 5 meals. I hear like eat all the time. I hear about, you know, intermittent fasting. I mean, like, what is the right way to eat?
Great question. And
you know?
Yeah, and the answer is sort of complicated, and it depends on each of our schedules and how we live our lives. But I will say, whether it's 5 smaller meals or 3 meals, do what works for you and notice how your body feels. If 3 meals a day doesn't work for you, eat 5 smaller meals. It's less about the structure and paying more attention to, do I have energy? Do I feel good? You know, am I falling asleep in the afternoon? Maybe I need proper fuel, or maybe I need to look at what I'm having for lunch so that that fuel can get me through the day. So one of the things that I say to everybody, and if you've listened to the podcast, you hear it all the time, protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. Protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. So
I
protein,
love that.
I just wrote it down.
Yeah, there's a bunch of those. So just, you know, we'll keep
Get
going.
ready.
But protein is clean, lean protein. Fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit. And a meal is really every time you eat. Snacks are just smaller meals. So ultimately, our objective when we eat and fuel ourselves is to keep our blood sugar even, never spiking and never dropping. This is sort of another question, but when our blood sugar is too high or our blood sugar is too low, we're storing fat. So if we can keep our blood sugar levels even, and that can happen by choosing the right foods, fueling our body throughout the day. But that looks different for some people, whether that's 3 meals or 5 smaller ones. That's very much a personal choice. I don't recommend going long periods of being awake and active without fuel.
God, that's
okay.
Great info.
That's good.
Yeah, you know, as people are sitting at home and eating and maybe gaining some weight, they're probably on the internet Googling all different types of diets. Maybe they're looking up Atkins, maybe they're trying keto, they're trying that maybe intermittent fasting that we talked about. I mean, what are your thoughts on those diets? Because what it sounds like you're saying is that health and wellness for each person is very unique, and it's not a one size fits all. So what's your take on some of these diets? Do they provide a real solution for people?
So bottom line, any diet you try will work. They will all work. The question becomes how long-term and how healthful. So a diet can help move the needle on the scale in the direction that you want, but can you maintain it? And are you removing the right kind of weight? So a lot of the typical diet programs out there, when we remove whole food groups or significantly cut our calories or do these kinds of things, what we're losing when the number on the scale goes down is water, muscle, and sometimes bone. And it's really the muscle part that's the problem, because muscle is metabolically active. The more muscle we have, the more we burn all the time, no matter what. So if choosing some of these ways of eating is forcing our body to feed on its own muscle because we're not giving it proper fuel, it's actually counterproductive. And then, because whatever way we chose to eat, whichever one of the diets you're picking, is not sustainable, we go back to these old habits. And now we have less muscle on our body to be burning that fuel that we're giving it, right? All these foods that we've added back in. Less muscle on our body means we're gaining that weight back as fat. So this yo-yo thing, right, of losing some weight and gaining it back, you might be the same number on the scale, but by body composition, after a lot of these fad diets, is that you're actually fatter than you were before. So
interesting.
It's really, it's really important to focus on nutrition more than this quote unquote diet program, so that we're properly fueling our body.
Yeah, that's super insightful. Essentially, stay away from that short-term fix, develop better habits for the long term that will see you through. And you would do that. Yeah.
Totally. That's the opposite of sexy. I get it, right? Like everybody wants the magic bullet, and it doesn't totally work that way. But any diet you try will work. They just may not be promoting the ultimate end goal that you're looking for. But in the short term, you can do whatever you want and find results. I mean, we could get into some of the nitty gritty of a couple of these, but for example, keto is so absolutely unforgiving. I mean, I joke that you breathe wrong and you knock yourself out of ketosis and you have to start all over. So something that's that unforgiving doesn't allow for life to happen, right? Like life happens. We have these occasions, we have celebrations, and in theory, we're doing that with other people. But like, if that can't be a part of our life, why is that the program we're choosing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you put it really beautifully before when you talked about a lot of people want to view this as black and white. And it's not. That we live in this world of gray, and we need to have solutions that are much more nuanced for our particular lifestyles. So
exactly.
Really, I mean, I'm taking down a lot of notes here, so I hope you guys at home.
So I have a question, Jen. So like, what's a safe amount of weight to lose a week? Would you say like 1 to 2 pounds is kind of a good way of doing it, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think generally like 1 to 3 pounds a week. I think 1 to 2 is more sustainable, but it also depends what those pounds are. So if you're losing water weight, you could easily remove 7, 8, 9 pounds in a week, but that's water, right? If we're focusing on really removing fat, it's going to be slower and building muscle. So I'm going to encourage everybody, forget the number on the scale of the whole weight. And I want you guys to all go get a scale. Bed Bath & Beyond is going to love me right now. Everybody go get a scale that measures body fat percentage. And not BMI, but actual body fat percentage. And it's not going to be the most accurate, but it's going to give us a different barometer. And what we're looking for is the change in that number more than the absolute number.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. I've been in a similar situation as you've described, like a yo-yo weight, and I do a diet for a little while, or I work out for a little while, and then I get back to the bad stuff. And looking at that number on the scale, you're always like, am I doing better? Am I doing worse? And sometimes it doesn't move regardless of what you're doing. But to your point, that body fat percentage might be a better test of where you stand in regards to your nutrition and your physical activity, right?
Exactly. It's a much better indicator of health than that overall number. Because remember, that overall number, if we're losing bone and muscle, is going to go down. But that's not what we want to be losing.
I do not.
So we have to use right. So we have to use a different barometer, and that's the body fat percentage.
Got it. And you mentioned BMI earlier. What is BMI? You said it's not good or something like that?
Right. So BMI is body mass index. And it's a calculation based on your height and your weight. And a really good advanced calculator will take into account your age. And it comes into play with our doctors and a lot of our health insurance. But the truth is, it is nonsense. It is a BS number. And it's part of what's creating a lot of the challenges that we face in this space. Because if what we're looking for is a certain BMI, well, you can't change your height and you can't change your age. So the only measure that you could do something, right? Yeah, time machine or something. But, the only thing you can do something about is the weight. And that's that overall number. And so that's part of what's pushing everybody towards these crazy fads where we're making that number on the scale go down, but it's not in a healthful way.
Got it.
So if we can teach our doctors, like I recommend everybody, when you get your scale that measures body fat, next time you go to your doctor, bring it up with them. Tell them that you want them to document this number and ask them if they have a scale that measures it. I think the more we all bring it up to be advocates for this, like we can get it into the health system as part of what we want to be looking at. I actually have a TED Talk in the works that's BMI is BS.
Cool. I can't wait
That's
for
great.
that. That sounds awesome.
So what is, and we had a question that came in, Jen, what is percentage body fat on people? Is there a chart? I'm sure it's different ages and gender and all that jazz.
It's different male to female and based on your age. What I'll do actually is I'll take a picture and we'll post it under the live recording video so that you guys can all have it. That's easier than me giving you a whole bunch of numbers right now that don't really make any sense.
Cool. Jen, the resource. Thank you so much. I have a bunch of quick questions here that I'm personally curious about. I'm sure the people listening are. What is gluten exactly and why should I care?
Great question. So gluten is the protein found in grains, in some grains. It's like this sticky substance. And some people have an allergy to it, and some people are just sensitive to it. So there are other grains that don't have gluten. So if you do have a sensitivity or you do have an allergy, you would choose the gluten-free options. However, if you're not sensitive to it, so sensitivity might be an indication of if you have acne on your back, that can generally be associated with it, indigestion or bloating. And it can even be up to 72 hours after eating the food that has gluten in it. So you would want to remove it if you have a sensitivity. And if you don't have a sensitivity, a lot of the gluten-free options are using substitutes that aren't necessarily as nutritious as the full grain that happens to contain gluten. So just choosing a gluten-free food doesn't mean it's healthier, doesn't mean you're going to be healthier. It comes down to if you have a sensitivity, these are the options for you.
Wow, super helpful. Thanks for that. Kind of along the same vein, why, some of those foods being changed to help people, why is healthy food so expensive?
Yeah. I wish I had a better answer than the FDA and our government and what's allowed to qualify as food. The reality is corn and grain is inexpensive, and so we can do a lot with it. And so a lot happens, and that allows us to keep food prices down. Genetically modified and things made out of chemicals are less expensive than things that are made out of real foods. And so it snowballs into the situation of food deserts on the one hand, and really, it can be expensive to live healthfully and make these healthful choices. But I will say there's a lot of chefs and a lot of local areas that are taking food waste from other grocery stores that they wouldn't necessarily put on the shelves and are selling it in places that did have a lack of fresh food. And the whole food waste thing in our country is like a whole other beast onto itself.
A whole nother.
Yeah,
right.
Talk for a different time.
Yeah.
So one question that we had in was, I recently read about meat shortages nationwide, as well as increase in meat prices. Should we start to consume less meat? And what are the recommended amount for meat consumption, which I think is great. So I guess animal-based protein, is that what you would call it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's sort of a distinction between how much protein should we consume and how much of that should be animal. And I think how much of that should be animal is a totally personal decision. So for me personally, I did a DNA test where it looks at lifestyle and things like that. And one of the things is that my nutrition is supposed to be like 60% protein. Well, if I was trying to get all of that protein from plant-based sources or non-animal protein, first of all I would be able to do all day is eat. And I would have to eat so many buckets of like beans and food. Like I would never be able to go anywhere or be around other humans. I mean, maybe now that's not an issue, but you know, like
Right.
it's not necessarily practical. So I think one of the benefits of animal protein is the bang for the proverbial buck of how much protein we get per serving. And I think individually, we all decide for ourselves if our body responds well to animal protein or not, or what types. I think right now the shortage is such an issue because of the whole supply chain of food and what's happening even globally right now. So I think on some level, it's a potentially short-term situation, but exposes a much larger challenge in terms of our food supply. And that, you know, we have food that, and animals, like I just read today that like some farm is going to have to probably like euthanize some of their
Livestock.
animals. Yeah,
Right.
livestock. Thank you. That's the word. But then we have people across this globe that are starving. And so that disconnect, I mean, I have a friend who works for a company that's working on some of that, but I think it's just evidence of a much bigger issue going on. And for each of us individually, it's a personal choice. I wish I could give you a definitive answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. Again, it's about that personal choice. What's best for you? You may be someone that needs a lot of protein, so eating meat products is part of your diet. But for other people being a vegan or a vegetarian could be totally doable depending on their specific situation.
And similar to the gluten, just deciding that you're vegan or vegetarian doesn't inherently make you healthy, right? We want to think about it more in terms of what we are eating and less in terms of what we're not.
Got it. And to that point, should we be keeping a food journal or food diary? Is that helpful?
So it depends where you are in relation to your goal and what you want to look at. I encourage all of my clients to keep a log. And even personally, over the years of dealing with this, like I had so much attachment to that food diary and I resisted it so much. But when I started to look at it in terms of data, and having data that it's not meant for us to look at every week as the food police, but it's designed to have data so that we can go back and identify patterns and say, okay, every day at 4:00 when I get hungry, what did I eat for lunch? And maybe there's something to all of that. Maybe it's those days where there's actually less protein at lunch, causing us to have this drop in energy at 3 or 4:00, but we don't know that if we don't have the data. So I love a journal. I love a log. I would actually encourage people to use one that has positive affirmations, stress reduction techniques, so things that prompt you for a whole complete wellness, not just the nutrition. And if you have some resistance around it, push through, because I think having the data is super helpful.
Yeah, and at Compass, we agree. We love data at Compass. And to your point, you want to analyze that data and figure out where the patterns are happening and ideally stop those patterns, right?
Exactly.
We have 5 minutes left. We have a few things I want to get into and kind of focus more on pandemic. So we've talked a lot about nutrition, about what we're putting into our bodies. How about keeping our bodies active? Do you talk about exercise and working out?
Absolutely. So here's another one to write down. Muscle dictates metabolism. Muscle dictates metabolism. The only way to build muscle is through intensity. So it doesn't mean that you have to go out and run a marathon. In fact, I think one of the biggest misconceptions around exercise and weight management or health is cardio. We can actually, the objective of cardio is to use our heart as a muscle. We can do that with resistance training. So build muscle, and whatever way you can figure out that you enjoy, do it. So if that means a few push-ups and planks in your house, if that means, going to a park on your walk and doing some tricep dips on a bench, cool. Just build muscle, focus on that, and keep your body moving. The more we sit down, here's another piece about muscle that sucks, is that if you don't use it, you lose it. So especially while we're home in quarantine and we're out of our typical fitness activity routine, we have to make a more concerted effort to move our mass and get moving and keep our body in motion.
Jenn, you must be an incredible coach because you have a lot of these great sayings. And I've been listening to this book all about extreme ownership and about great leadership. And the authors of the book talk about leadership being done through simplicity. If people get it, they can take it and work with it, So you're giving me a lot of things to work on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Jenn, real quick, how many steps a day? I heard that's one of the latest contentions, that it was made up at 10,000. Somebody says 8,000. Can you give us the step answer?
I think the steps is nonsense. Move your body. I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't say it, but move your body. I don't care how many steps, make it more steps than yesterday. And what's the intensity of those steps? So I think that's also the difference between cardio, right? This idea of we want to go do 8 million miles. Who cares? You could get a lot of benefit from doing a half a mile that's super intense and build muscle that way. So we do want to make sure in terms of our fitness, we're getting cardio, strength, and flexibility, and that can be super efficient. It doesn't mean you have to go out and figure out 85 million steps a day.
Great advice.
Got it.
Because we are talking about pandemic things, and I know a lot of my friends have shared this with me, what's your stance on alcohol? I know a lot of people are using it to cope, which may not be the best way to proceed, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this was actually my first podcast episode, The Truth About Alcohol. And listen, I enjoy a great cocktail every now and then, right? I happen to prefer brown liquor. Anybody else want to go for a scotch when this is all over? I'm in, right? But the reality is, it's not so much about the alcohol itself or the mixers that come in it, or sometimes even the fact that our inhibitions or the things we choose to eat when we're intoxicated is different. It really comes down to the liver and the fact that our liver has to prioritize what it processes. Our liver has to process fat and sugar, but it knows what to do with those. Toxins like alcohol, right? It's called intoxicated. That's a toxin, and it prioritizes higher on the list than the fat. So our liver has to process out the alcohol before it ever addresses any of the food that we eat. So that's how alcoholics develop fatty liver, because their body never gets a chance to process that fat, and the fat builds up. So it comes down to really choosing how to intelligently choose our food to support our liver and our overall health, even while we choose to imbibe every now and then.
Great information. Now, as we wrap up here, I know there's people listening who are nervous about getting sick, about contracting corona, COVID. What are some takeaways that we can run with about boosting our immune system in this kind of scary time?
Yeah, so we want to think about it in terms of supporting our immune health and doing what we can for our body. And that's first and foremost in the gut. So focusing on gut health will have tremendous benefits for your immune system, vitamin C, vitamin D, digestive enzymes, probiotics. There's a lot of misinformation and bad science in the supplement world, but it can be super helpful. Reach out to me. We can talk more about some of that stuff.
Amazing. So since we have run out of time, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Yes, of course. So I work with clients individually and in groups. So just reach out to me, DM me on Instagram at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK, or our Facebook page for the podcast is at the same handle. And of course, I would love to hear from you guys, answer questions, reach out, and Salad with a Side of Fries podcast.
Which is amazing. I've been listening. Thank you so much for all of your info and advice. Thanks again, Martin. You have anything?
No, I think it was really great. I just want to do a special shout out to my good friend Alexander DeBordis, who I've known for Over 20 years, Alex, if you can believe it. And he gave you a lot of great positive affirmations. He's a very smart, intelligent man. And if he agrees with you, Jenn, that means you know what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Alex. That's awesome.
All right, beautiful.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jenn.
Thank you for having me. So much fun, guys.
A real pleasure.
All
I
right.
wish we had more time, but next time.
We'll do it again.
Beautiful. Bye.
All right, guys. I think that was great.
We are still live on Facebook.
Yeah,
I know it's the post show.
That.